When the body is silent, it is because the soul has begun to scream with another voice. Maybe no one warns you, but there is a moment when everything stops. The sound outside loses its strength, the invitations of the world seem to echo in another frequency, and the body itself stops looking for what once seemed urgent. It is not weakness. It is the beginning of a call that comes from within. A whisper that crosses the skin and lands directly on the soul. Often, it is in this pause that something begins to awaken. When the woman stops chasing after promises that shine on the outside, she discovers a new silence, not that of absence, but that of deep presence. A silence that seems empty, but that carries in itself all the seeds of what really matters. And then, in place of the desire that ran anxiously, a nameless longing is born. Not of another body, not of another story, but of herself. An old longing, which has always been there, disguised as urgency, of need, of search. A longing for an internal space not yet inhabited, for a home that has never been decorated with words, but that has always existed. It is in this curve of life that everything changes. Because the woman who withdraws is not running away. She's coming back. And there's nothing more powerful than a turn inward. For years they have taught that stopping is dangerous. That if you are not wanted, it disappears. That if he is not available, he loses the chance. But what no one says is that there is an immense strength in those who decide to no longer sell themselves out of affection, no longer negotiate their essence for crumbs of attention. Yes, at first it hurts. The absence weighs heavily. The mirror seems mute. The eyes of others no longer shine. But little by little, the pain transforms. The discomfort becomes a portal. Discomfort turns to flame. And you start to see. Not the world as it is, but as you always knew it could be. In that silence, you remember. Of everything he forgot to fit into narrow places. Of the parts of yourself that you hid to be accepted. Of the dreams that he stopped dreaming to follow the steps of others. And when remembering, something blooms. Something wild, ancestral, uncontrollable. She is the woman you have always been, but that the world did not know how to welcome. It no longer needs molds, nor approval. It doesn't fight for space, it occupies. She doesn't demand love, she offers herself entirely. Not for lack, but for abundance. Because there is no longer any urgency. There is presence. This woman does not disappear in the dark. She turns on lights. Not to be seen, but to illuminate one's own path. And if anyone wants to follow, they will be welcome, but it will not be a condition. Society fears this woman. Because it is not predictable. It does not follow the scripts. He does not dance to the music of other people's desires. She hears another melody. One that is born from the womb, from memory, from intuition. And in this intimate dance, she moves steadily. His every step is a gesture of courage. Each silence, a conscious choice. And even if no one understands, she continues. Even if they laughed, she continues. Because he knows. Because he feels. Carl Jung said that everything we deny in ourselves ends up one day returning as destiny. Perhaps that is why this silence is so powerful. It is not the end. It is the new beginning. The exact point at which you stop running and start to find yourself. Some will say it's loneliness. Others, that it is weakness. But you'll know, it's maturity. It is wholeness. It is the point where you stop asking permission to exist. And when you realize it, it will be too late to go back. You will have become temple. And temple does not need to be proven. It just needs to be inhabited. The ancients called it a rite. Today it just seems like a collapse. But it is not. It is initiation. The invisible crossing between what you were and what you are about to be. The woman who chooses to withdraw, who no longer surrenders on impulse, who stops letting herself, is breaking cycles. And to break is not to shout, nor to destroy. It is simply not repeating. It's looking at the old patterns and saying, not here anymore. And then everything realigns. Not from the outside in, but from the inside out. The dreams are yours again. Desires take on new meaning. Intuition speaks louder than fear. Haste loses its grace. The body breathes with a different frequency. Desire still exists, but no longer as hunger. Now it's an invitation. It's slow dancing. It's choice. When love comes back, it will be a celebration, not a necessity. And if it doesn't, that's okay. Because you've already found yourself. This woman no longer hides in papers. He no longer bends to fit into stories that are not his own. She writes her own narrative. With real paint. With the firmness of someone who has cried, has already been lost, has wanted to give up, and yet continued. Her voice may be soft, but it carries thunder. His silence weighs more than 1,000 words. And his presence, their presence is revolution. Yes, she still does. There are still cloudy days. It still has shadows. But now she knows. Inside her lives a sun that no one erases. If you feel this restlessness that you can't explain, this desire to move away for no reason, maybe it's the beginning. Perhaps your soul is asking for space to speak. And if that's it, listen, respect. Because what comes after silence is always more true. Every time the soul awakens, the world around you seems too small for the size of what you're feeling. It's weird at first. You try to continue as before, follow the same paths, maintain the same bonds, laugh at the same jokes, but something doesn't fit anymore. Words are hollow, gestures seem rehearsed, and even the warmest hugs don't warm up as they used to. Something inside you has expanded, and what doesn't keep up with that expansion starts to bother you. It is not arrogance. It's perception. You just started to see with different eyes. Before, it was enough to be busy to feel alive. It was enough to be desired to believe that it had value. It was enough to please to feel that he belonged. But now it is no longer enough. There is a new lucidity circulating in the blood, a silence that echoes profound truths, a peace that does not depend on any circumstance. You stopped chasing and, in the emptiness that remained, you found room to breathe. And there, where everything seemed to be gone, you found yourself whole. The world looks and says you're gone. That is far away. That has lost its luster. Little do they know that the brightness is now different. It comes from within. No more reflectors. You have learned to turn on your own light. This new stage is frightening. Because there is no script, there is no map. The advice of others seems outdated. The expectations of others lose their meaning. You feel out of place, but at the same time, strangely at peace. This is where the tests arise. Old temptations return as if they were new. Easy proposals knock on the door. Old stories try to rewrite themselves. But you are no longer the same. And not out of pride, but out of conscience. You realize that everything that once enchanted you now tires you. That what was once a dream became a distraction. And that what you called love was often just fear of being alone. And then you choose to stay. Not out of obligation, but because he learned to be his best company. And this is where the magic begins. When you no longer need to run away from yourself, nor fill yourself with the other. When solitude becomes sanctuary. When absence becomes a lesson. And when silence becomes an answer. The body, once restless, now becomes a temple. Each gesture is a rite. Every thought, a silent prayer. And even though you don't know for sure where you're going, you feel it's the right path. Memories come back, not to hurt you, but to set you free. Those old scenes, the crying at dawn, the toxic bonds, everything takes on a new meaning. They were not mistakes. They were parts of the crossing. And now, with lighter eyes, you can be grateful even for what only hurt before. It's not that you've stopped loving. On the contrary, you are learning to love more wholly, without losing oneself in the other, without exchanging truth for acceptance, without shrinking to fit someone's desire. It is a more serene, more mature love that starts with you and overflows without demanding a return, that is not nourished by promises, but by presence. And the most beautiful thing is that, in this process, you are not isolating yourself from the world. It's coming back to him in a different way. Firmer, more conscious, more true. Your voice may be lower, but it carries more strength. Your gaze may be calmer, but you see further. Its presence may go unnoticed by some, but it is deeply felt by those who know how to see beyond appearance. You stopped begging for space and started creating your own. You stopped looking for in others what could only be born in you. That's it. That changes everything. Because the woman who rebuilds herself from the inside becomes indomitable on the outside. She no longer molds herself to the taste of the other. He no longer lives on borrowed expectations. He does not exchange his peace for any presents. No longer apologize for being intense, for feeling too much, for wanting truth. And those who don't know how to deal with it, stay away. But who knows, he approaches with respect. Because he feels there is something rare there. Something that time, pain, losses, all this helped to polish. A soul that bled in silence and now shines with light of its own. Maybe that's why you feel like you're more alone than ever, but also more whole than it has ever been. And that's the quiet beauty of who you're becoming. There are no fireworks, there are no clapping hands. Only the light breeze of freedom. Only the sound of one's own heart beating with truth. You no longer have to be everything to everyone. You don't even need to fulfill any ideals. You just need to keep choosing yourself. Every day. Even when it seems difficult. Even when the world screams otherwise. Because there is a kind of courage that is born of silence. A force that no one teaches, but that the soul recognizes. And it's that strength that keeps you going when everything seems to fall apart. You're not getting lost. It is being polished. He is cleaning himself of the excess. He's taking off his masks. It's going back to the origin. And when you realize it, you'll be smiling for no reason. Sleeping in peace. Waking up light. You will look back and understand, it was all worth it. Every tear, every break, every no. Because it was these scars that paved the way back home. To the place where you no longer need to pretend, nor prove yourself. Where it is enough to be. And if it still hurts, breathe. Pain is part of childbirth. You are being born again. There comes a time when the pain of continuing to fake it weighs more than the fear of being who you are. And it is at that exact moment that something inside you comes loose. Not with noise. Not with fanfare. But with an almost sacred lightness, as if an old part had finally been given permission to leave. The mask falls, the character falls apart, and you are left, raw, real, whole. It's not about having all the answers, nor about being unwavering. It's about allowing yourself to live with truth, even without guarantees. It's about choosing every day not to betray your essence, even if it costs the world's approval. You begin to realize that it is no longer possible to live where there is no reciprocity. That it no longer makes sense to fight for spaces that require you to diminish yourself. That there is no longer any way to continue where love needs to be begged. And then, in this silent awakening, a new woman is born. One that no longer needs to be strong all the time, but now knows the strength it has. One that does not feign lightness where it weighs, nor smile where it hurts. That no longer accepts being filled by anything just so it doesn't seem empty. This woman is in no hurry. She knows that everything arrives on time. That waiting is not absence, it is maturation. That time is not against her, it is in her favor. Because it is time that heals, cleanses, reveals. And what it reveals now is a sweet clarity. You never had to be perfect, nor desirable all the time. You just had to be true to what you feel. And now that you've learned that, nothing holds you back anymore. The old bonds lose their strength. Forced obligations dissolve. What was an automatic routine is broken. And in place of all this, the unprecedented is born. The light. The real one. You realize that the silence that inhabits your body no longer hurts like it used to. It is now a home. It is refuge. It is where you listen to each other, welcome each other, find each other again. And it is there, in this intimate space, that new questions flourish. Not those who judge you, but those who open you up. What do I really want? What do I accept just out of fear? In which places did I leave pieces of myself forgotten? These questions do not ask for an immediate answer. They ask for presence. Because they are keys. And each key opens a different door within you. You start to remember who you were before the world taught you to hide. Before having to be good, available, efficient, sensual, always ready. She remembers the girl who dreamed big, who was sorry, who believed without fear. It is still there. I was just waiting to be heard. And when you meet her again, everything changes. Courage returns. Intuition gains a voice. The glow that once needed external validation now springs from within, without depending on anyone. You begin to live more whole, to breathe more calmly, to love more consciously, and, above all, to choose oneself, not out of ego but out of respect. Yes, some people will walk away. Some doors will close. But others will open up. And whoever stays will stay for who you really are, not for the version you invented to please. You no longer need to be accepted. You need to be you. Is that it? And when that happens, you stop begging for crumbs and start reaping abundance. An abundance of time, peace, presence, truths. Because where there is truth, there is fullness. The woman who crosses this desert does not come back the same. She comes back stronger, wiser, more whole. And at the same time lighter. Because he left the weight of what was not his in the middle of the way. And now that you know who you are, no one else can convince you otherwise. You no longer sell yourself for promises. He no longer surrenders out of need. He no longer adapts to what suffocates. You only stay where you fit whole, where you can be sky and storm without fear. His love is no longer urgency, it is abundance. And when you love again, it will be by choice. And not to fill, but to overflow. And if by chance love doesn't come, that's okay. Because now you are enough. Now you know that your company is temple, your presence is healing, your essence is home. What once hurt you has now taught you. What once limited you has now set you free. What once seemed like an end is now a beginning. And you understand that you are not alone. That many other women are on the same path. Silent, but awake. Invisible, but whole. Collected, but lit. You are part of something bigger. Of a silent, ancestral movement that unites women who no longer accept to live halfway. Who are no longer satisfied with the shallow. That no longer bend for convenience. This movement has no name, no flag. It happens behind the scenes. In the early hours when someone decides not to answer an empty message anymore. On mornings when someone chooses their own silence instead of the approval of others. And each woman who awakens becomes a beacon. Not to point the way, but to remember that there is one. And that following it, even with fear, even alone, is always better than living denying yourself. So if today you feel that you are different, that you are more sensitive, quieter, more attentive, embrace it. It could be the beginning of your journey. And if you're already halfway there, keep going. Even without knowing exactly where it will lead. Even without guarantees. Because the soul recognizes the fertile soil. And everything that is born from the soul blossoms with roots. The woman you are becoming no longer fits in small stories. It no longer fits in tight places. It no longer fits into loves that require renunciation of one's own truth. She needs space. Of silence. Of presence. And the world, even if it scares, needs her like this, whole, alive, free. No woman is transformed without first facing the mirror of silence. And there are days when that mirror looks cruel. He doesn't show what others see. It reflects what you ignored. The unspoken words. The hidden fears. The stifled wills. It reveals the versions you created to be loved and the parts of yourself that were left along the way. Looking at this takes courage. Not the noisy courage, made up of ready-made speeches, but the silent courage of those who decide not to run away anymore. Of those who choose to stay with them, even when the world invites them to get lost. Because in this process of coming back to yourself, there are phases that are difficult to explain. You feel strange. The old clothes no longer clothe his soul. The conversations don't fit. The places seem smaller. And what once made you smile now rings hollow. But this strangeness is not a mistake. It's a sign. An indication that something has expanded within you. Something that no longer accepts living squeezed between obligations and masks. You start to say no. And not out of coldness, but out of conscience. Say no to invitations that steal your peace. To the bonds that feed the need. To the papers that force you to fit where there is no more space. And every no you say out there is a yes you give yourself. But the world doesn't understand. They'll try to pull you back. It will say that you have changed. He will call his introspection coldness. His lucidity of arrogance. Your freedom from selfishness. And yet you keep going. Because now you know, There is no return for those who have heard their own soul speak. You're no longer looking for a place to fit in. It's creating a place where it can be whole. She no longer wants to be chosen. She wants to be seen. He no longer wants to live on promises. He wants presence. He wants truth. Life begins to respond. Gradually, new connections emerge. People who speak your language even in silence. That look you in the eyes without looking away. Who don't want to mold you, but to know you. These relationships do not scream. They whisper. Don't beg. They play with respect. And that's why they are rare. But when they happen, they are valid for all the others. You understand that you don't need many. It needs the right ones. Those that vibrate at the same frequency as your new beginning. And that changes everything. Because now you don't accept less. Not out of pride. But because you have already felt what it is like to live fully. It has already touched the taste of being you without fear. And after that, any bitter crumbs in the mouth. You've stopped chasing. Now it walks. With firm steps, even if slow. With the serenity of someone who knows that he is no longer losing himself to please. You're coming back. Not for those who were before, but for those who always were. And on the way, it leaves trails of light. Not because he wants to be a guide, but because the walk itself has become a lighthouse. Other women will recognize it. They will see in you something that pulsates in them. Something that they still don't know how to name, but that they already sense. And they will get closer. Not to follow you, but to also meet again. This is the beauty of those who choose their own soul. It doesn't shine to dazzle. It shines to remind us that it is possible. And even though there is still pain, now it has a function. The pain became a bridge. Nostalgia became direction. The void became a cradle. The body, once restless, now becomes an instrument of listening. You start to feel everything more deeply. The seasons, the cycles, the encounters, the silences. Every gesture becomes prayer. Every word, a choice. There is no longer any need to prove anything. The love you have now for yourself does not fit into justification. It just exists. It just pulsates. He just is. And that's enough. You look back and see all the versions you've ever been. The girl who believed too much. The young woman who sought approval. The woman who divided herself to be accepted. And he feels no shame. He feels tenderness. Because they all brought you here. They all cried so that today you could smile in peace. The past no longer weighs. The guilt dissolved. The internal demands fell silent. And instead, a kind of compassion was born that embraces even its own mistakes. You realize that you have forgiven yourself. Unceremoniously. No rituals. Just because I understood that I was trying. That he has always been trying. Even when it fell. Even when he made a mistake. Even when he gave in for fear of losing. And now it is no longer lost. Because he found in himself the ground that he had previously sought in others. You learn to be alone without feeling alone. Waiting without anxiety. To desire without getting attached. To love without getting lost. And this is not coldness. It is maturity. It is presence. It's love in its cleanest form. There will still be difficult days. There will still be moments of doubt. But now you know where you live. He knows how to get back. You know that inside you there is a home that no one else can invade. This is the greatest re-encounter, the one with one's own inner house. And there, in this sacred space, you decide to stay. Not because he gave up on the world, but because he chose to live in another way. Slower, more whole, more true. You don't want any more victories that require soul renunciation, nor achievements that cost your peace. Now you measure life by other metrics. For what it feeds, that expands, that calms down. And in this new world, the simple has another value. A coffee in silence. A sunset without distraction. A hug that needs no words. A presence that does not require performance. Because the miracle was never in the extraordinary. He has always lived in what you can only realize after you silence. And you were silent. Not by giving up, but for wisdom. Now you listen. Now you see. Now you feel it. And for the first time in a long time, you're alive. Present. Every woman who listens to herself with truth will eventually break with everything that taught her to be silent. And this breakup, although silent, changes everything. It is not something that is shouted or posted. It's an internal pop. An almost invisible but irreversible turning point. Suddenly, you can no longer smile out of obligation, nor pretend that everything is fine when something inside you pulses for change. That's where you start to bother. Not for making noise, but for refusing to repeat patterns. Its presence restless because it carries freedom. And freedom, when it becomes flesh, is like fire. It warms those who are close, but it also frightens those who only know how to live in chains. You begin to live with more lucidity. Observe everything with a new lens. The looks that once enchanted you now seem empty. Beautiful words that have no action turn into noise. Rootless promises no longer find anywhere to hold onto. And no, it doesn't harden you. It matures you. You learn that tenderness is not submission. That love is not blind sacrifice. That presence is not prison. And then, let go of what no longer vibrates at its frequency. And that takes courage. Because letting go is also renouncing certainties. It is also giving up the comfort zone. It is letting go of bonds that seemed eternal, but that no longer speak to who you are becoming. In this way, you may cry. Perhaps he doubts. Maybe you want to go back. But something you already know, there is no turning back. Because what has awakened in his soul no longer accepts living in prison. You realize that lightness doesn't come from having everything sorted out. It is born when you stop carrying what is not yours. When he lets go of the demands, the papers, the disguises. When you simply breathe being who you are. And in this new space, an even rarer woman appears. One that no longer seeks approval, but connection. Who no longer negotiates his intuition for logical arguments. Who doesn't doubt more than he feels just because no one else feels the same. She doesn't have to be right. He needs to be at peace. And peace has now become a compass. You begin to honor your cycles. To respect their silences. To welcome their fatigue without guilt. He learns to say yes only when the body and soul agree. And to say no, even with fear, when something doesn't vibrate as it should. And with that, the days gain another rhythm. There is no more hurry. There is presence. There is no more searching. There is a way. And even though everything out there still keeps running, you choose to take it slow. Because he learned that running is not always arriving. Life begins to give you back in new forms. People who arrive without invading. Words that touch without hurting. Invitations that don't take you away from you. You will gradually understand what it is to be whole in a world that has always asked you to be divided. And this is revolution. A silent but profound revolution. You look around and realize that you're no longer trying to save anyone. Not even waiting to be saved. Now you walk alongside. It offers a hand, but does not cancel itself out. It gives love, but it is not lost. It remains open, but no longer vulnerable to emotional dishonesty. His body, now calm, vibrates with another energy. He doesn't draw attention. He calls for presence. He does not beg for touch. It becomes an altar. And whoever does not know how to respect this altar does not cross its door. You learn to distinguish what nourishes you from what just occupies you. Start feeding what expands you. And what was once an automatic routine becomes a conscious choice. You stop running on autopilot. And it begins to exist in a state of creation. Their presence changes the environment. His word becomes scarcer, but more true. You no longer speak to convince. Speak to express. He no longer listens to answer. Listen to feel. And in this new listening, you hear yourself like never before. He discovers wounds that still burn, but that now ask for healing, not denial. He perceives desires that have been dormant and that now awaken lightly. And he understands that not all pain was a lack of love. A lot was an absence of self. And when you come back to yourself, everything aligns. Chaos reorganizes itself. Life begins to make sense, even without logical explanation. Because what moves now is no longer reasoning. It is feeling. You stop controlling. Learn to trust. And this does not mean passivity. It means surrender. A surrender that is born from the deep trust that, by being true to yourself, Life will take you exactly where you need to be. And then you smile. A smile that does not seek an answer. A smile that is born in the womb. That comes from the soul. And in that smile, there is liberation. You don't want to explain yourself anymore. Nor to justify himself. Nor fit labels. You just want to live lightly but intensely. Deep but free. Serene but pulsating. And when he meets other women in that same state of mind, there is a silent recognition. A twinkle in the eye. A shared strength. Because no one needs to explain their own freedom to those who have also conquered it. This woman you have become is rare. But not because of scarcity. By completeness. She no longer needs to hide. Not even if it bloats. It just is. And that's enough. If there is still pain, you welcome it. If there is fear, you walk with it. Because he learned that the essential never comes without risk. And that living with truth is always an act of courage. You're ready. Not because everything is in place, but because you are now your own place.